Okay. All right. Hello, this is Patty McGee from The Hydrated Life, and we are here tonight talking about Mother's Day, um, the wounds that kind of come with it sometimes. And I have my good friend Faith Moscato with me, who has been a blessing to me over the last 12 years. I met her at Abundant Life, and she started spiritually counseling me then, and I didn't know what I was in store for. And it just has nurtured into a blessing of a friendship for me and her. And tonight we just want to talk to you about motherhood. What happens when, even though your relationship with your mother is good, you still may have some wounds in there, and how to change that so you can communicate with your children today so that we don't carry this on from generation to generation. So if you just want to give yourself a little introduction, Faith.
Hi, it's so fun to do this with you, Patty. And these are some of my favorite topics. So I really know that God's going to use this for healing for people, and it'll make you think. I am a pastor, a trauma specialist, and a lover of people. One of my nicknames is the Human Rolodex. So I think that says a lot about me. I'm constantly meeting people and connecting people together. And I think that the fascinations that I have had with how trauma affects us and tries to steal our identity from us have come from a very personal place of healing and restoration in my own life, from things that I have been through, and, you know, continue to understand how they impacted my life.
Yes. She's also the author of the book Unnormal. So you can get this. Where can they get this? On Amazon?
It's available on Amazon. It's available in Kindle, Audible, and a hard copy, and you can find it there. Faith Allison, Unnormal.
Yeah. What's your social media? Is it Faith Allison?
Yeah, I mean, it's Faith Allison Moscato. That's my full name. Faith Allison is my pen name. There's a reason for that. And I also have a practice called Intersections for Healing, and a pastor, a church called United with Christ, Panama City. So I've got a lot of different spots on social media that you can find me.
Awesome. Well, I thank you for coming on tonight and doing this with me. It's been a dream of mine. I've, always wanted to work with you in this special atmosphere, due to all of the work that we've done. You helped me with the father wound, the mother wound, the sibling wounds, and all of my own wounds, and have given me permission to forgive myself and showed me how to change my life so I could work with Dylan also, which has created this wonderful bond between the two of us that we, now aren't carrying it into the next generation of his family.
Yeah.
you know. And I remember when we were talking the other night, we talked about feminine energies and enriching my relationship with Dylan. And even though I had a good relationship with my mom, she didn't teach me the things that a mother should teach you, right? We had we kind of just brushed everything under the rug, as they say. We never really discussed family problems. We just said, get over it, stuffed it down inside, and moved on. And I didn't realize how that would affect my life after she passed on, right? Especially with all my siblings. So, can you go over some of the characteristics of what a mother should teach us and how it relates in the spiritual world?
Mm-hmm. So, we're doing this in part because this month we celebrate mothers and Mother's Day. And, for a lot of people, that can be a really amazing time. And for some people, it can be a very painful time. And so a mother plays a really significant role. Part of the work that I do in doing identity work with people is to look at the things that shaped them, coming into the earth, coming into life. What are the three pivotal relationships that we find begin to shape our identity, and those being the father, the mother, and then peers and siblings in the third category. And so we're choosing to focus today on mothers, and the mother identity in our life has three primary functions of nurture, comfort, and teaching. And sometimes people say to me, how does nurture and comfort differ from each other? And I nurture is this thing in which you see. Is that me beeping? Hold on, let me turn that.
No, it was me.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. I'm really easily distracted. So the mother, the difference between nurture and comfort is that if you've ever seen mothers today when they wear like a baby that is strapped onto the front of them, and the baby is like in one of those big wraps, and you can't see the baby, but this one thing, that whatever that baby needs, that mother is going to be the first one to know it and the first one to address the needs, because the baby is held so close to the mother. And that's a beautiful picture of nurture. It's something that develops between a mother and a child, that helps them feel seen and recognized, and that their needs are significant. And then comfort is about emotional safety. Comfort allows us to feel like, it means you can run to your mom and you have somebody that will, brush you off and bandage you up even when you did something dumb and not shame you for it. So they're emotionally safe, and they comfort you when you need comfort. And then teaching for a mother is about developing character, being with someone when they need to learn something, and being able to be present for them as they're learning something and maybe cheer them on. So those are three primary roles. And, spiritually, this relationship that's developed between a mother and a child is significant, because some would say that in some ways, looking at the Godhead and how we relate to God, this is actually how we relate to and develop a relationship with the Holy Spirit, or the trusting that he's a comforter, that he's going to care for you, that he's close to you, that he's in you, like Jesus said. So, those are some of the ways that a mother feeds a child. And so in contrast to that, if you have a mother wound, and we're using the word wound because a wound indicates a place where you took a hit. It sometimes means that something happened that was difficult, but it can also mean that it's something that wasn't fulfilled that you actually needed. And often mothers, because of the other role, or lack of a father, or challenges that a father has, a mother will take some type of the father's role, but she's not like Superwoman. She has to give something else up in order to do that. So maybe if you have been raised in a single family home, you will actually potentially have a mom who had to be a provider, well, in a provision and protection, and those are father roles. And so we'll talk more about that another time, but that means that the mother's going to have to give something up. So tonight we're defining a mother wound as emotional trauma from an absent or emotionally unavailable mother. It often develops when a mother's nurture is lacking or inconsistent, leaving a child feel unsupported. A mother wound is really nurture being denied. There's a primary thing about nurture, comfort, and teaching that allows her child, the children that a mother has, to develop these essential tools around the rhythms of life and getting their needs met. And so, in contrast, when a child suffers, what we're calling a wound, you have a wound, an area of need that hasn't been addressed, it can leave you with these symptoms that are going to be familiar to some of us: anxiety, fearfulness, emotional instability. That means highs and lows, up and downs. You don't know how to comfort yourself, or you don't know how to receive comfort. Struggles with learning. This is interesting. And struggles with being on time. How many of you have a friend that, has struggled with being on time? And this isn't somebody that's 5 minutes late. It's somebody that is consistently always half an hour to 2 hours late, and they show up and they're like, well, I'm here, and people get upset with them. But often it's a symptom of a place in their life that was never developed. Their circadian rhythm of their body in relation to the earth around them was never developed in a meaningful way by another human being. They literally can look at a clock and see, the 12 and then the 1 and the 2 and know that's 5 and 10 minutes. It means nothing to them. There's no relationship with time that's quickly developed in their life. And so another thing is that you could struggle with is being unapproachable or having a stern and guarded affect, in order to kind of like, because you're not sure about nurture, you're not sure what that means when people approach you. And then, of course, a big one is addiction disorders often develop, where a child has had to learn how to comfort themselves. They've had to learn how to meet their own needs. And unfortunately, pretty early on, found a substance or a habit that did that for them. And that has developed now into an addictive cycle because that's been triggered in them, at a genetic and an emotional level.
Wow.
That was a lot.
I work with a lot of people who are late
Mm-hmm.
for every massage, every day for work.
Mm-hmm.
And, it happened at work the other day. I set up everything for this treatment, and my teammate came in, my coworker, and they're like, hey, how are you? And, no regards to anything that they didn't set up.
Mm-hmm.
And this gives me insight into probably why.
Yeah. We assume people are intentionally being rude. And, after some years of a relationship with someone like that, they know that you're going to be upset, but I promise you they do not completely understand why. Because what you're measuring in their lateness, they don't have a good measurement for.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
These are often, I don't know, I feel like I should say this. These are often children that were put to bed, at weird times or not at all, or they found their own way to bed. They didn't have certain things. They didn't get up in the morning and they weren't taught, get up, brush your teeth, get dressed, this normal habits. Like we learn the rhythms of life and how to meet those demands that people put upon us in healthy ways, really beginning in childhood.
I remember my oldest sister, there's 5 of us. So there's three sisters, all a year apart, then a brother who's 15 months younger than me, and then a brother that's six years younger than him. So when he was born, my mother used to say, oh my goodness, he sleeps so well. But come to find out, my oldest sister was getting up in the middle of the night and taking care of him. And my mother never knew that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's not an uncommon story. All of us need a mother. And so in sibling groups, it's not uncommon for one of the children to take on this really important, role. And they may be 2 years older than the child that needs it, or they need a mother themselves, but it creates other challenges, I would say, for that child, and then for the child that is being cared for, because they're being cared for by a child, basically, not an adult.
My mother was a good mother.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of things. But as I look back on our conversations now, when she was born, my grandmother was too sick to take care of her. So the first 2 years, she went and lived with an aunt.
Mm-hmm.
Which may give insight into why she kind of just went about life,
Mm-hmm.
She took care of us. She did the laundry. She did all of that. Many times we had to call our parents to come home from the bar or to bring us food. That so we lacked some of that nurture and that providing for us.
But talk to us about what you mean when you say your mom was a good mom, because some people might hear that what you just said and go, "But what?" But your mom was a good mom. You have very fond memories of her. You were with her when she passed.
You know,
What made your mom a great mom?
my mom, like her and I were so close since I was a little girl. I would go to the laundromat with her. I'd go hide in the car so that I could be with her, and we'd go sit at my aunt's and they'd have coffee, and I'd go outside and shoot baskets. And I went camping with them. And as we got older and I became an adult, we went camping together. We golfed together. I will say that my mom could remember everything that everybody did, and she would recall it at the worst times. And sometimes it was embarrassing,
Yeah.
but we have a history of heavy drinking in our family, overall, from my grandparents on my mom's side. Not so much like, I don't think my brother, well, I probably drank the most other than probably one other sibling. But mine was really out of control. But my mom, she danced on tables and bars. I danced on tables and bars. We were like two peas in a pod. Instead of telling me and teaching me to get down off, it was encouragement to come up, right? And when I look back on it, I can see that lack of the mothering part of it, the teaching part of it. And I remember when I had that trauma when I was 13, I was so ashamed of hurting her the night before Mother's Day, number one, and then not being able to tell her what happened and carrying it with me all those years until I met you, which you've allowed me to take all of that and share it with Dylan so he could ask me any questions that he needed to. And so that we could bond and I could start teaching him the way I should teach him as a mother.
Right.
Yeah.
How has coming to terms, with and healing from those things that you didn't get to share with your mother, how has that changed your relationship with your own son? Because you only have one child, Dylan, and I know you guys have been close because you've been through things together. You are a classic single mom family. But how has healing and kind of facing these things that happen to you, how has that changed you as a woman and as a mother?
As a woman, I feel like since we've counseled in that, and me being able to talk to Dylan, me getting up and moving away to Georgia to kind of learn to grow up. Like, I don't feel like I ever matured. And when I read Changes That Heal by Henry Cloud, and he said we stop maturing at the first sign of trauma. That was me as a young girl. So I never really got past that junior high and high school stage, which could be represented in the things that I did growing up, when it came to getting out of control from drinking and things like that. So once I worked through it with you and read all the book studies and everything, it's allowed Dylan to be able to ask me anything, right? And us to have good, honest conversation back and forth so that there's nothing going into the deathbed that I'm hiding, because it hinders our health. All of that is part of what brought out my breast cancer, right? It's 37 years of hiding everything. And, at 39 and not telling anybody about it. And realizing as I'm going through chemo and radiation, I'm not living my best life. And so it's helped me mature into the 60-year-old woman that I am, along with has helped heal my body at the same time and my mind.
Yeah.
And then Dylan's getting 30 years earlier than what I got. And I think that helped him through his breakup with his girlfriend. And all of the stuff through his work as a professional gamer, being kicked off teams, brought back, kicked back off. I think all of that has helped us mature to be able to handle things better.
Yeah.
in life.
Culture puts a lot of significance on, fatherless homes, the absence of a father. Um, there is there's not, we don't talk as much about this.
Right.
In my life, my mother died the day after I was born. And so there was a woman who took care of me. There was somebody taking care of me. And that place for me, though it appeared safe on the surface, ended up being a place that hurt me very deeply as a very small child. And then, when I did, my father eventually took me home and hired a babysitter, and the babysitter became my stepmother when he married her, and she had children very rapidly after that. And so there was this weird feeling in my life of always being on the outside looking in, not being able to find a fit, and I did have, really strong challenges with my dad as well. And, so identity was a struggle for me. But the thing about, this topic we're talking about tonight with mother wounds is that, often, say you had, say for a guy that had a really strong dad, no father wounds, like he's, well developed, he's successful in his professional life, he meets his goals, he's disciplined, he's ordered, but he has this curious detachment emotionally. He has a hard time hugging his wife. He has a hard time comforting his children, maybe even has a hard time understanding emotion in a general way. Even when he accomplishes the most amazing goals in terms of discipline, he never celebrates that. And these are significant, symptoms of the absence of a strong, you know, uh, present mother in the life of a boy, as he was growing and developing.
Let's talk about that hug for just a second.
Mhm.
Is there a difference? I have several people around me who give that little tap hug. It's like they can't wrap their arms around people
Mm-hmm.
and give them that nice, genuine hug. Could that be a symptom of a mother who, or
It can be, I don't think it's the only thing. I think,
yeah,
for some people, personal safety is on a scale, in terms of how close they let you in, whether it's physically, emotionally, verbally, in relationship. Sometimes, people that have suffered sexual trauma, for example, um, they either let everybody in or they let nobody in. There's a swinging saloon doors where there should be a bedroom door that's locked and shut and opens on, as I will. And in its place in my book, I wrote about, there's just a set of swinging saloon doors that just, you know, lets anybody in. But conversely, they may have hyper fixations on personal safety and don't touch me, don't trigger me, don't get too close. So there's those things there too. But when we talk about a mother wound, we're talking about
okay,
emotional connection, the ability to wrap your arms around somebody, yes, but also to know when it's appropriate to do it and not to do it,
right.
right? To be present and aware with, to be aware of someone else's feelings and emotions. Remember, there's that element of comfort, learning how to receive comfort, learning how to comfort someone else. So sometimes those side tappers are like, they don't want to get in your mess. They don't want to get in your stuff.
Let's talk about low self-esteem. I know I
Hmm.
struggled with that most of my life. I still do.
Hmm.
I'll get to a certain point that I feel really good, and then I reel myself back in.
Hmm.
Um, who am I? How do we overcome that? How do I, you know, break free of that feeling?
Boy, that's a big question, Patty. I think we could probably ask that for each one of these, areas that we look at. If you had a mother who was, emotionally unavailable, self-absorbed, unable to see you and take care of you because she worked 3 jobs and wasn't available. Um, there's a level of affirmation that you do. It's important you receive that from a male role model in your life, from a father. But women have the ability to coax identity, to nurture identity in a different way than a father. And when you don't receive that, as especially, I think, girls are meant to go through things. It's very hard for a father to lead a prepubescent girl through a time like changes in her body and getting her period. That's probably every single dad's scariest moment in his life, next to giving her away at the altar. um there's something about sharing womanhood with your mother. And I think that that's something, Patty, you could talk about, that you felt like you didn't really have
Yeah,
a picture of, and that really impacted the development of not, you've always been feminine, but your ability to be in touch with that and what pleases you and be good with that was difficult for you.
yeah. I worked out of the masculine, really up to the last couple of years, quite a bit. I was the tomboy, dressed the part, acted the part. I remember my mom combing through our hair and putting curlers in, and I hated every moment of it. And I remember saying to myself, I should just have been a boy. It would be so much easier. I had all the mannerisms. I opened the door for people. Everything that they say a man should do, I was doing, as a kid. And my mom, she left it up to the school to teach us.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. We watched a video in school for a period and how to use a tampon and a pad, and we never discussed it. None of it. I remember our only sex conversation was, if you're not enjoying it, you're not doing it right. That was, all she ever said to me. I can't speak for my other siblings. But there was never any conversation. Again, she worked, like you said, 3 jobs. She was always wallpapering and painting. She was bartending till 2 a.m. She'd bring people home from the bar, her and my dad, and cook them breakfast. And, our lives were not on a schedule. Like you said, we didn't have bedtimes. We didn't have, like you said, she didn't tell us to brush our teeth. She didn't tell us to wash. None of it, right? Mm-hmm. She did all of the work. She didn't even have us do chores. So it's very interesting. I see where we lack in this in our family. Mm-hmm. And it gives answers, for me anyways, as to why the 5 of us are the way we are today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's growing up, I was raised in a very large family. There was definitely an age gap between me and my sisters. My older sisters were, 10 and 12 years older than me. My younger sisters, at least I think 7 years younger than me. And my stepmother, when she became a mother, was extremely young and kind of came from a family where she had not a lot of emotional support. She was close to her mom, but it was very hard for her to be a mom. I'll just say that. And I felt sometimes like she just needed me to be her BFF, while she was raising all these little kids. And so growing up to be a woman, I remember this awful feeling of never being able to identify what pretty was for me. Yeah. I remember looking at my body and thinking, I hate my German thighs. I never knew, there was always something wrong, and I could wear the prettiest dress, put a ton of effort into it, and then walk away from the mirror and almost like forget the image that I saw that I loved at the moment that I finished preparing myself, because I just had no habit of mirroring that in another person, with another person. I have this really stark memory of my sister Karen. My oldest sister had come home to visit, and she was there, and I was doing my first solo for a Christmas concert. And so she bought me a new dress, and she curled my hair, and she even burnt the skin off the top of my forehead here. So I have a big old burn here. Thankfully, with bangs that curled over it. And despite the burn, that moment of having a woman help me dress and curl my hair and stand me in front of the mirror and say, "Oh my goodness, you look so pretty." It was so significant that dress, I've never told her this, but that dress I wore that she bought me, I had that dress till I was about 45 years old.
Oh, wow.
All those years. Because it signified a moment in my life where somebody had affirmed me and been present with me in creating the image that I fell in love with that night in the mirror. I'll never forget singing that solo because I was nervous. It was my first time doing it, and I loved it so much. I was convinced from that moment on I dreamed of becoming one of those singers that leaned against the piano and crooned, in a nightclub. How much it forged my identity in that moment, and that's a mother. Mothers, they water their children with words, with affirmation, just being present with them, brushing their hair, reading them a story. I mean, there's such a beautiful thing that develops in a child when a mother is able to be a mom and be present as a mom.
And I feel I've done that with Dylan, right? And bringing him up. I was very nurturing to him, maybe overly sometimes, I feel, but but I think it's led to us today being as close as we are, through everything that he's gone through and I've gone through. We don't hesitate to talk to each other about things.
Yeah.
Just, just for me, it's a blessing. Because I know a lot of mothers. I've never thought I was a bad mother at all. Like I hear mothers say, "I don't know if I'm raising my kids right," and all of that. And have I made my mistakes? Yes, obviously we all do. Nobody comes with directions, right? And so, but in the general overall, I feel like I've done a really good job raising him. And, and I'm proud of that. When you go back to talking about beauty and that, I never really thought I was beautiful either. I could never relate to that at all because the ugliness was on the inside. Shame, the guilt, all of that. And when I went to that deliverance conference in 2022 here in Georgia, and when that person sent me the picture of the three of us, the selfie, and when I opened it up in that spiritual moment, right, we were worshiping. I was kind of looking around like in awe and wonder of what are these people doing, right? I was texting you saying, I don't know, this is kind of crazy. But when I opened that picture and I saw through my eyes into the back part of us, and I said, wow, you're beautiful. That like changed my whole world. That changed how I see myself today. I don't have to wear a dress. I don't have to wear jewelry to be beautiful because I've already seen my inner beauty, which changed me. The jewelry, yes, it's an accessory that makes us feel better, right? It makes us on the outside feel better. But I wish everybody could see themselves the way I saw myself in that moment.
Yeah. So that, it's significant that happened to you in a spiritual setting, Let's talk for a moment about, God's heart for women. for boy. I mean, well, let's not just say for women. Let's just talk about, how does the role of a mother, you know, the one who, nurtures and cares for and delivers, that baby into the world. How does that represent something so significant to God that he would do everything he could to heal wherever we haven't? Like you said, you said to me, how do I find, how do I deal with low self-esteem? That is, I think, and you can forgive me for this, to the people that are listening. I am a pastor, so I'm going to speak about faith for a moment. But I think that if you take away the religious lens of like, well, God said that this is who you are, so you have to be it. And think about for a moment that God is not just a good daddy, like the Bible says. He's actually the person who created you. In fact, the word says that he had you in his mind's eye, and that you are the center of his affection, that he designed you and thought about you and gave you a name before he even placed you in your mother's womb. And so, how many of you have ever gotten a car that, like, you never read the instruction manual, and one day you find a button, like I have a new car and I discovered this button that actually keeps your car between the lanes. So I have like that beeping lane assist thing that goes off if I go over the lane. Well, then I discovered that the feature the guy told me about that I never wanted to know about, because it's a self-driving feature. I was like, oh, I'm never going to take my hands off the wheel. But I discovered that if you put that on, that your car never goes over the lines and the thing never beeps, And so, sometimes if we don't read a manual and we don't understand the full function of something, we never get the benefits of it, right?
Right.
And so God doesn't want to just heal us because, oh, poor us, we're broken and we're sad. He actually wants us to actually be who he created us to be. And I believe that woven into our design by God, it says that he's the author and the finisher of our faith. Our life was constructed with the end in mind before he began. And so he writes into our story opportunities like you had at that conference that you were so like, I don't know about this, but you had a very spiritual experience in that moment with God. And what happened is your whole lens of how you saw yourself was cleared.
Yes.
You could say recalculated, adjusted. Like when you zoom in, a camera lens, and get it just right. It's so sharp and clear, and you've never questioned it since then. In fact, I heard you say that internally you feel so beautiful that even if you don't have accessories on or you're in sweatpants, you still know you're beautiful.
Yep.
That is God's heart on display. And like you said earlier, when that happens for a woman or for a man, because men need it too, what happens is it instinctively becomes the inheritance of your children. Like you pass it down to them. It changes the way that you talk, but it also provides an avenue for them to have a different experience than you had.
Okay.
So, maybe they've had other challenges in life. When we heal and it changes the way that we live, the way that we see ourselves, I call it coming home to ourselves. When you come back home to yourself after, a long diversion through a painful thing, there's something, it's like when they say all the lights went on in Georgia, it's like something in you lights up and your children inherit whatever that is, and they will notice it too.
So children born after this happens, or the ones that are already born and, so like Dylan?
Both. No longer will, so the things that you beat, like Dylan's, people would say, well, addiction, is woven into, Patty's family line. And so it's Dylan's inheritance too. Actually, no, Patty beat that in her generation. Dylan does not have to deal with that. And Dylan's children don't have to deal with that. And we don't have to write that into a genetic chart. This is all the things that are passed on. And somebody very forensically minded might say, well, that's hopeful thinking, Faith. No, I promise you that if you do a genetic chart, in generations, you will see what disappeared from one generation to the next, or maybe two generations later. There's no evidence of it.
Okay.
And that's, from emotional wounds to physical wounds, spiritual wounds, things that have happened to us. It's important that we come home to ourselves and not let those things take over our entire life. It matters to our children.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about the mother when they're still alive and there's distance? How do you overcome that feeling that the mother doesn't want you to be around you, or you don't want to be around the mother because of the way they are?
Mm-hmm.
How do you counsel people through that it's okay to distance yourself from that family member
Mm-hmm.
if it's creating unrest inside of you?
Mm-hmm.
So as Mother's Day is coming up, your mother's alive, but she's been not nice to you, and you go through this holiday, but there's kind of a void because you want to be there with her, but you know it's not healthy for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're kind of saying a couple different things there. So, the distance that maybe between a mother and a daughter, if it's related to present day pain, it's important that you don't just go, well, I'm healed and I'm whole and praise God, I'm going to have a relationship with my mom tomorrow. What I would say is you have to acknowledge, the Bible has this thing. It says that we are not wrestling against flesh and blood. We're not wrestling against people. People don't hurt people intentionally. A lot of people will argue with me on that. But I think we're made in God's image, and it's counterintuitive for us to be mean and hateful and even outright abusive, violent to another human being. It's always because of something that happened in your generation or generations before you. It's stuff that gets written into your story code. I'll say it that way. So, the way that every relationship is healed is through transparency. Transparency requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires a little bit of safety. Like, you got to gauge, is this person capable of hearing me? Are they just going to, be even more hateful? What are you actually wanting from that relationship to change? Because, if you have a long-term relationship with a mom and they've been very hurtful and they've actually been someone that has repeatedly over your lifetime hurt you, as you heal, you may have a curious void where you don't need that woman to be your mother. You don't need her the way that you used to. You've accepted that she just has struggled with being a mom. She's a woman, she has children, but she's not ever been able to be a parent. And even though she technically raised you, I think that it's safer sometimes for people. And when I say safer, I'm just talking about what's good for your own growth and development, is to look around you and say, I really want a mom. I would love to have a woman that I can talk to the way that I always imagined, but my mom can't do that. The woman who gave birth to me can't do that. So who else is in my life that might actually have some of that for me, that love for me, that affection that I could actually let in a little bit deeper into my life? Or maybe there's someone that's always been doing that, but they were never who you want. They were not the mom you wanted. You wanted your mom. So you've never been able to equate what this person was doing for you as mothering.
Yeah.
I just encourage people. The Bible says that God puts the lonely in family, or he puts the orphans in families. God works through family relationships. So, and that isn't always your blood relationship. So when you heal and when you have moments like Mother's Day and they come and you don't have your mom, I would say this even to people whose mom has already passed from the earth and now you've got healing, but your mom's not here for you to practice like you with with your mom. Don't settle for that. Don't spend your life in grief. Ask God for relationships that feed you like a mother, and ask God, for people that you can be that kind of mom to, that didn't have a good mom or doesn't have a good mom right now. Um, so that's a piece of it. I want to go back to one thing that I said about vulnerability. Transparency requires vulnerability, and vulnerability when you're trying to fix a relationship requires a level of safety. So sometimes that means you start with a letter that you write or a card that you write. You start with something small and see how they can respond to your truth. And when you're dosing out truth, there's that thing from Mary Poppins: a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. When you're trying to help someone hear your truth, don't just blast them. You don't know if they've got any revelation of what you're aware of. Little doses, and try to sandwich them in things of gratitude or what they did do right, or something that's kind and compassionate, so that they can hear maybe what it is that you've discovered and what you would like to change about the relationship. And that can only be an invitation. It can never be a demand. You cannot demand from someone that you've had such unhealthy things happen with, you can't demand that they change for you. You can't demand that they hear you. It's an invitation. And you have to prepare yourself that they may say no.
Wow.
And that doesn't make you any less of a person. It just means that that's not going to be where you get that need met now.
Yep. I know back when my grandmother, when she was, she had 9 children, and she was trying to raise them. And my grandfather was an alcoholic, and he would spend all the money from the bar that they made. They owned a bar. He would, on the way to the bank, he would spend it. And I remember her telling us that she left him one time and tried to go back home, and her dad said, "Nope, you made your bed, you lay in it." So she went back to him, and she made it work for 50 years or so. And but when you hear the different stories from the children, my oldest aunt, she's the last one alive, on what she did. She practically also became the mother, kind of similar like my sister, my oldest sister, right? And I think that was very popular back then, in the 40s, 50s, 60s. That oldest child took care of everything. I know let's talk a little bit about the grief, because sometimes our mothers pass away before we can heal the wounds that we have. Mm-hmm. How do we not carry that grief? I don't have grief I'm fine with my mom dying, but I noticed that from March 31st till May 31st, I was having this grief because my mom died on March 31st. Then we had my middle sister's birthday. Then we had Easter. Then we had my dad's birthday, who passed away. Then we had my sister's birthday, my brother's birthday, Mother's Day, my mom's birthday, Dylan's birthday, and then my dad's death.
Mm-hmm.
And with my mom passing, and my siblings all decided that at that point they didn't want to be together for anything, right? So it was a grief for me.
Mm-hmm.
That we couldn't come together to celebrate like we used to.
Mm-hmm.
And I really struggled getting over that until this is the first year that I was able to move beyond it.
Yeah.
And be okay with it and everything.
Yeah. I think that, the loss is something you have to come to terms with. So, there used to be 5 stages of grief, and the last one was acceptance. And we didn't necessarily say, well, that's the last one, but, we would say there's, a stage called acceptance. And once you accept it, that's the end of it. You move on, but they, later have added a sixth stage called finding meaning.
Mhm.
And I think one of the beautiful things about addressing your heart and your soul and endeavoring to live wholehearted, looking at wholeness in your life, is you always have an opportunity, regardless of what's missing that you can't replace. You have an opportunity to find meaning today in spite of that loss. So what in grief, in healing from grief, that sixth stage is an acknowledgement that that loss has actually changed you, and finding meaning that's beautiful out of that. What do you carry with you? So I say when you've healed from those types of things, generally one of the things you've endeavored to do is to forgive or to release your mother from the pain, and that forgiveness, and that release. I'll say this, we put a lot of stock in, you have to, you have to forgive people. When it's a parent and they've not asked you to forget, they're not, they're not even around for you to ask, you know, to ask you to forgive them. The challenge that you can have sometimes is, you're asking for something that's really too complicated. They're not asking you to forgive them, and vice versa. So sometimes that stage of releasing is not forgiving someone because they're not asking for forgiveness, but actually releasing them and releasing the effect that those things they did had on your life, like releasing to somebody, like you're letting it go. Um, in a faith-based sense, you're releasing it to Jesus and the Father to take care of.
Okay.
Often the things that happen, they can't be fixed easily, right?
Right.
Even if somebody said, I'm sorry, they can't go back and change what they did, right? So accepting it, knowing it's changed you, um, knowing that that's not all you are today. You're still alive. We're talking about, like, what if my parent is gone now and I can't say, hey, I've forgiven you or I've released you from this, look at me, like the little kid, look at me, mom, look at me. You don't get to have that moment. I would say to you, find a way to honor the work you've done and let them know. And you would say, well, how do I let them know? They're dead, you know, they're gone. And I would say, there's this phrase I use: you lost or you misappropriated. You lost an experience with a mother, or your experience with a mother was misappropriated. It was used in a different way than it was meant to be. That those experiences, because you're still alive, you can still have those experiences today. So you can write a letter, and tell her what you did. You can go to their grave and read the letter. You can put flowers on your mother's grave. If you had a really terrible mother and you're really moved by what I said about, I want a woman in my life that actually loves me and mirrors back to me love, and you don't want that space to be taken by the icky stuff you have with your mom, you can write a letter and release your mother from all holds
Yeah.
on your life, from all jurisdiction, from all operations against you, and you can just say, I'm breaking up with you once and for all. And you can go to their grave and you can set that letter on fire and watch it disappear and walk away from that grave completely free of those entanglements and open to receiving something fresh in your life concerning that type of relationship. So that was a big answer for how do I deal with, grief.
No, that's good.
It is a thing that happens at Mother's Day. We
Yeah.
celebrate those, moms. I mean, when I was younger, and, it almost felt illegitimate because I had a stepmother who was endeavoring to be a mom, but she wasn't my mom. And I was always aware of that. And it felt illegitimate, to want my real mom. And I remember one summer when I was 10 years old, we had moved to a new city. And I, for some reason, became convinced in my mind that my mother was still alive and might be looking for me. I don't know how that got in my head, but every day, as soon as I could, I went out and sat on the front stoop by the front road and sat there reading a book, but so she could see me if she drove by. And I spent the whole summer doing that, waiting to see if she would see me, that maybe if she drove by the house looking for us so she could rescue me, I would somehow be seen by her and rescued, and my mom was dead, and it was something that just was unfinished in my life. And so God, I finally put it away until I was in my 40s, and I felt the Lord saying to me, you really need to mourn that your mother died. And I laughed. I was like, how do I mourn someone I never knew? And he said, exactly. You don't know what you lost. I need you to ask your siblings about her. I need you to answer the question marks, And so I think that is a space for me that I needed healing and restoration. And I have been so blessed. I do have a stepmom. I have ladies that, have been, I could look back and see like when I was a young mom and, my whole family had moved to Florida and I'm in New York and had 2 children now. I was 18, miserable, didn't know how to do hardly anything for my children. And there was a woman next door to me, Thelma Mapes, that stepped in and she said, "Oh, honey, you need help. Let me show you how to do that." And she showed me how to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
And, when I was 40 years old, I could look back and she's long gone from the earth. She had to be 75, 80 years old when she helped me. But I could look back and say to the Lord, thank you for sending me Thelma. Wow, what a gift she was,
Yeah.
And that is part of the Father. If you're struggling, you feel stuck in this area, like where your mom is gone, or maybe she's still present, but she's just not a mom, I want to encourage you to find healing from that and wholeness. And, there's some things that we're going to leave you with so that you can do some of that work. But I also want to ask you to have fresh hope. The Bible says that God places the lonely in families. Maybe you don't like the family you got. I promise you there are other people that are looking for family. There are other moms and dads that have been good moms. And I have more spiritual children than is decent on the earth.
I know.
There are people that I did not give birth to, they call me mama, or mamas, as my little friend Addison would say, mamas, that are people that I pour into, and I want you to find those people that God has in your life that are meant to do that for you and with you.
Yep. I notice that sometimes in life we look at our lack rather than what we have.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can look in the other direction and see the blessings that we've had, see who God has put in our lives, right? And not what we've lost, not who we've lost, and all that. And that's really helped me move forward too, in this journey. I can celebrate all the holidays. I can, and be okay. And Mother's Day is coming up this Sunday. My son's going to work, so we're not going to do anything till Monday. And the past, that would bother me. But now, as I've healed through all this trauma and all these wounds that I had, it's just made it so that now I can take myself out to brunch if I want to on Sunday and be okay and be happy. I could go for a bike ride, whatever, and be okay with it. So what are some ways we can help women as they move forward in this journey, Faith? What are some tips?
So there are, you have opportunities. Every place where you feel lack, is actually an opportunity for you to experience abundance. And sometimes the person that's keeping you from experiencing that is actually you.
Yeah.
So I'm big on self-care and finding ways, this is a funny word, but to reparent yourself, that you just mentioned one of them. You take yourself out to lunch on Mother's Day. You experience something rich, and how can you gift yourself something, mother to mother, daughter to mother, how can you recreate something that you never experienced that you're completely capable of doing today? And when possible, don't do it alone if you don't have to. Take a young person that's motherless to lunch.
Yep.
Talk about your mom. Tell a funny story about your mom. I feel like I'm speaking to you, Patty. You know, that they would be able to, you've been able to weed through your whole experience with your mother and find the gold and, spit out the seeds.
Yep.
You're eating the juice of like how funny and rich. I mean, your mom, I only met her a few times, but she was so vibrant and hilarious. I mean, she was pretty old when I met her, but she was a spitfire.
Yes.
And, I wished I had known her longer. And I'm sure a lot of people felt like that around her. But you didn't focus on just the seeds. You ate, I'm thinking of a watermelon when I say that, you eat the watermelon, you spit out the seeds, you can help someone else adjust their perspective, their way of looking, their paradigm about their own parent by demonstrating that in front of them.
Yep.
And then help them see and find something good. And if they can't, then for God's sakes, become that in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. We're both that we've
been
been able to help others. God's given us that gift to be nurturing and to help others. And, my whole life has been that for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about journaling? What do you think?
Yeah, there's some some journaling prompts that we're going to give you in a worksheet where you can describe a memory of your mom where you needed comfort or approval but didn't receive it. Write about it, talk about it. You might say, well, why would I do that? That's painful because possibly you have too many of those stuffed inside and you need somebody to lance that poisonous pit and release it. And maybe it makes you cry or maybe it makes you angry. I promise it won't last forever. We are afraid of feelings sometimes, but the feelings you don't feel, there's a great book that I love called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. The things that you're trying not to feel that are unresolved, you just think there's no way to fix it. Like I said earlier, so why feel it? I promise you, if those feelings are in you, they're waiting to be felt. And your body will be like the little donkey in Shrek going, pick me, pick me, pick me, pick, pick, pick. And you'll have symptomology from wherever those things are stuffed that eventually makes you sick. And, it's okay to write things out, to let them go. Like I said before, if it's ugly things, release it into the paper, crumple it up, rip it up in tiny pieces, release the memories with the paper, and burn it. Flush it down the toilet. Do something symbolic to let your body and your soul know that you're not living in bondage to that anymore. So journaling can be a really helpful thing. Identifying through journaling, I talked about writing a letter. Maybe writing a letter to God about why, how, and I'll say this, there's real value if you're stuck in the why, question, and you just can never resolve that, because there is no good answer for the why, that's acceptable. Maybe you need to ask God, how are you going to heal that? How are you going to show up for me now?
Yep.
How will this change? How do I get over this? And maybe that's what you need to write about.
Yeah.
There's a tool I use called responsive journaling, where when you need to have a conversation that you're avoiding with God, write, get a piece of lined paper, a composition notebook, and start and write a question. Write out the thing that you're wanting to talk about. Skip a line, put your pen or pencil on the next line, and let God speak. And people always say, well, what if he doesn't say anything? And I always say, I promise you, if you put your pen down, you're going to hear something. Start with what you hear and more will come. Don't try to read it while you're writing it. It messes the process up. Just write. And when you get done, and your pen doesn't have anything else left to say, go back and read what he said. Skip a line, put your pen on the next line, and you answer. Continue the conversation. When you're done, skip a line, put your pen down, let him speak. It's God is so intentionally wanting to talk to you as his child. Remember what I said before. Everything that has happened to you, he has not just been aware of, and he hasn't sat on the sidelines like a bad coach and let you trip over your face. He has things embedded in your story for you to discover that are so amazing and so good. They have the power not to replace what happened, but to do something else in your life that begins to fill you up again. Don't live half empty because you missed some things.
Yeah. And it can take years. I know for me, working with you for the last 12 years, you've seen the journey of, me driving drunk down the road and saying, if I don't get a DWI tonight, I'll never drink and drive, and quitting like that, right? To putting the right people in my life at the time. And then I had to heal again, right? And then with my mom's death and going to Haiti and losing friends, getting the book Changes That Heal, that opened my eyes again and healed some more. So it's like this journey that we're on that it just continues, but it gets better and better, seeing my beauty. I remember I couldn't feel, like, I just felt like I wasn't feeling life, and it was down here, and it was a couple of years ago. So I tried ayahuasca, which is a herbal psychedelic drink, right? I went to this guy, and you're supposed to meet with Jesus, right? A lot of people, that's what they say when they go and they do this. And it was supposed to be a ceremonial thing and stuff, but it didn't pan out the way that it should have. But in the process, you drink this terrible drink that tastes like bark, and you vomit, and all this stuff happens to you. But after the second dose, I was laying there, and I just, I wanted something to happen, right? And I finally sat up, and he goes, "What is wrong?" I go, "I just want to feel something, And so he gave me a third dose, and nothing ever happened. Right? And that's unusual for ayahuasca to drink, and not have the psychedelics, and not have, for somebody that's never done psychedelics, right? The first shot should have put me into this psychedelic world. But when I got up the next morning after I fell asleep, we took a selfie. And this is what's so important about the spiritual world, right? When we can see things differently. It was 7 a.m, and I saw the selfie picture on Facebook, and you couldn't tell. I looked beautiful. I looked stunning. And I was like, holy cow, look, although I didn't feel what I thought I should feel, God showed me another way of what I looked like and who I was from that aspect of it. And I've never wanted to go and do it again, right? It wasn't, not because it was terrible and I vomited, because I really wanted to have that experience. But God keeps showing me that I don't need all of those experiences to feel him, to know him, and to be healed, right? I just have to keep working, and he keeps putting people in my life for suggestions, or to work together to do everything. All the fine women from Abundant Life that I'm still friends with. Deb Perhan, she just introduced me to a supplement to help with my stomach, a company. So those are the moments that we need to look for in our lives, for the healings that we're looking for, again, rather than the lack of what we have. And sometimes we want that quick fix. And it's taken years of where we are, so it's going to take time to heal from it all too. And I think this year is the best I've felt through all of that. Everything I've been doing the last 12 years, this is like the first year that I'm ready to move on to the next part of my life.
Yeah. I think that one thing you said that's really important, I just want to highlight it, is the journey is okay. It's okay that it's a journey.
Yeah.
There's no destination that you arrive on the earth where I'm good. All the work's done. Everything's fixed. I'm better. There's a journey that you're on, and God is going to walk with you, and you're going to try different things and meet different people and be open to, even to God in different ways and different levels through the life that you live, and I think if we could be better with the journey and stop expecting people to presto bango, come out of the microwave called healed, delivered, and set free, completely done, we'd be good. I do believe that we have the opportunity for those moments. I don't think most of us could bear the change.
Yeah.
We live in a culture, as much as we like fast microwave stuff, most of us do not like change that quick. Like it's difficult. Change can be difficult, especially when it's in regards to things that have been painful for us. So embrace the journey. And I want to say this, I think this is so important. When you get discouraged or you feel like, this is too hard, or think about your children. Patty, you've been really clear about how this has impacted Dylan, and Dylan has experienced a lot of his own healing, just watching you embrace healing and watching you let go of stuff. And so Dylan has completely changed, and, I can say this in my life that, me going through things and embracing healing and embracing changes has allowed my children to embrace those things and to grow and to just enjoy the journey and the wisdom that comes from the journey. But I want to share this with you. It says in Proverbs 31, in the Passion Translation, it talks about this woman that's like perfection. We all have this idea of the Proverbs 31 woman, but I love this in verse 28. It says, her sons and daughters rise up and call her blessed. And in the Passion Translation, it says, her sons and daughters arise in one accord to extol her virtues, and her husband rises to speak of her in glowing terms. But it's this idea of there's something about her womanhood that rises up, and it pours into her children, and it's noticed by her husband. And the Hebrew word translated arise can also actually be used in terms of rise up with power. And the Septuagint, the original language, the original translations or writing said, she raises her children so they will grow rich. Now, that's not about finances, though it may incorporate that. But whatever you recover from, you have recovered out of your history something beautiful that you're now passing on to your children and to their children and their children. And so that richness in that power is something that you get to leave behind you. It's a weight, it's a frequency, it's a sound, it's a vibration that is deeply spiritual and deeply a working of the soul that comes out in your feelings and your emotions and the way you think about things. And I promise you, in those moments, if you get weak and weary and you think, I don't know about this anymore, this is too hard, think about your children.
Yep.
Think about your grandchildren. Think about your great grandchildren that maybe haven't even been born yet. Is it
Yep.
worth it for them?
Right. And don't put that burden on them, right? To make everything better. I hear a lot of people that put a lot of pressure on their grandkids and stuff. And, it's not fair to them,
Mm-hmm.
and that wound, I know a lot of women are suffering right now because their children aren't talking to them, and all they can do is keep working towards being a better mother, right? And healing from their past so that they can possibly have that relationship down the road. But to know that it is a journey. It's a journey,
Let's touch on that just for one moment. If you're a mom and your child's not speaking to you because of the past, because there were painful things that you did, and you feel like, you're doing penance or something, and you've experienced a level of healing, and maybe it hurts you that your children won't forgive you, or you're experiencing that distance. Respect their pain. Don't be aggressive and pushy. Trust the process. Remember what I said about little touch points with lots of sugar, you know, and more than anything, in moments when it feels overwhelming and you feel like you've lost them forever, it's irreparable. In those moments, you have to remember the work that you did, they have a right to as well. And you don't maybe get to be the one that delivers that. You don't get to be the one that orchestrates that in your children. But if you let them, God will work with them to help them heal. And you'll, hopefully have that opportunity, to have a new relationship with your kids one day, or a better relationship than you do now. In the meantime, if your heart is hungry to be a mama, find somebody that's looking for one, and be the kind of mom that you weren't to your kids, to them.
Yeah. I wanted to share just a quick story about Dylan. Probably a month ago now, I had sent him this social media post that I saw, and it was about a son, and that if he could see what I see through my eyes for him, that he's a good person. And I'm always trying to send him something uplifting, without being overbearing and stuff. And he's like, I know, Mom, I'm trying. He goes, I was at Sprouts grocery store last night, and this lady was with her children, and she picked up a sweet potato and was like, oh, it's $2, and she put it back. And that triggered him from our past when we didn't have money.
Mm-hmm.
And people helped us. So he goes, I paid it forward. He goes, I bought all of her groceries for her. Mm-hmm. And he goes, it felt so good. He goes, I've been paying attention, Mom. Yeah. And that's where it changes in the world when we do the work that we do to heal ourselves. Like you said, we may not experience it from our kids, mm-hmm. right? But as long as we know that they're good and they're doing it out in the world somewhere else, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Because that's really what it's about. When you give, you don't give to get something back. You give so that it makes an impact on other people.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So how can people reach you, Faith, if they want to work with you?
So you can reach me. I have a website, faithallison.com, that is a portal to everything from my book to my Intersections for Healing private practice. You can message me on social media, though that can sometimes be, it might take me a day or two to get back because I get so many messages on that way. But there's a contact form on my website that you can fill out, and it sends me an email, and I get back to you. I think that the conversation we're having tonight is huge, and it's going to probably ripple through you. If you listening now while we're doing it, or later you hear it. The thing I want to say is, if you share this with a friend, be present for a conversation afterwards.
Yes.
Sometimes, I'm a big advocate of counseling. I am a counselor. I'm a pastor. I'm a huge advocate of family in the church, and having people you can go to in your faith community that can be with you and listen and pray and, be present with you. But be present with the people that you share this with. Ask them, was that hard for you to hear? Was there something that you felt led to do out of that? And if you do any of these, the worksheet that we put up at, with this course, or with this broadcast tonight, there, for example, there's an item in there that you can try called an inner reparenting letter. So there's like some bonus items on there. And the inner reparenting letter says, write a compassionate letter to yourself. Imagine comforting your inner child with the love and support your mother didn't give you. For instance, you might say to yourself, you are safe, you are loved, and you did nothing wrong. As you do these things, as you read these things, do them. Find something on it. Don't let this run through you like diarrhea.
No.
If you're hearing this, you're hearing it on purpose. And I don't know about you, but I've been guilty sometimes of like, oh, I know somebody that needs that, and then I don't do anything with it myself. So I'm huge on community and connection points. Post-COVID, everybody needs connection.
Yes.
If you share this with somebody, go back and ask them, and say, hey, what'd you get out of that? Did you experience some healing? Was it hard? Which one of the exercises did you do? Be the community that something like this demands, because these are relational wounds. And God, when God acknowledges that we get hurt through relationships, but because of that, he uses relationships in our healing process, and not just with him, but with each other. Be present with someone else as they go through this.
Yes. That's awesome. Thank you, Faith. I really appreciate it. Now, your book, there's questions in there, right? That they can answer also, right? And,
yeah.
Abnormal. What did I do with it?
Unnormal. I love that, abnormal, though.
Unnormal, yes.
I have been accused of being abnormal sometimes.
No, it's unnormal. So there are study questions in here if you want to pick this up. Do you want to tell a little bit about what it is?
It is a book I wrote that details some of my own story, my own life, where some of my wounds happened. And because a lot of my wounds happened in relationship to family and extended family, I use my own story, and then I use God's story and how God interfaced, in my life, in my healing journey, because I believe that God does everything. He did everything he did because he's a father, and he is all about family. And, he is a father to the fatherless. Jesus is your big brother. He is the firstborn amongst many brethren. He's the ultimate big brother. And Holy Spirit is a comforter and a nurturer, very much like a mama figure, and there to help you in this journey. And so I endeavor in that book to talk about how does God use family to heal you, and how does God build a life for you on this earth that incorporates family with him and with others in a community of faith. And I touch a little bit on religious abuse in there, and things that, when you get hurt by families that are in your faith community. I will say what my friend Sarah says. I just love this. Shout out to my friend Sarah, who says that the church The church did not hurt you. A person in the church hurt you. And maybe you went into the church relationship expecting for them, everybody in church, to be your family, and you were carrying your own wounds that left you open to those things happening. But the church is not a building, it's not just a group of people, it's the body of Christ that represent him. And God's heart is never for someone in that body to hurt you. But people who are on their own journey definitely have the ability to hurt you. And so I endeavor to help people, encourage people to find community, to not let the things that have happened to them isolate them from family. Relational wounds happen in relationships, and God uses relationships to heal you. And that's really what that book is about. And of course, it's called Unnormal. People always ask me that because I believe that, like a beautiful mosaic, none of us are exactly the same. No one. And we all have the beautiful opportunity to find how healing and restoration in our life and coming home to ourselves portrays something that no one else could actually do the same way. And it's in that journey of us becoming unnormal and embracing that we are unnormal that God actually gets to receive all of the glory that's due his name.
Yeah.
We represent his glory on the earth. And so I love that. So that's what that book is about.
So pick a copy up on Amazon, answer the questions, and Faith is on all the social media sites, so you can reach out to her at any time. We do have the worksheet, the Healing Emotional Wounds Companion Worksheet. I put a link in the comments here. I'll put it on Facebook also. You can private message us and we can send it to you there also. This is going to be a 3-part series. In June, we're going to be discussing the father wound. And that's going to be an awesome presentation also, because it hits close to home for so many of us. So around Father's Day, look for that presentation. We'll put it out. And then in July, we're going to talk about the sibling and friendship wound, ending with that, as we can all relate to that also. So happy Mother's Day. Thank you to everybody that's watching currently and that will watch in the future. Have a good night. And Faith and I are available on social media for you to reach out to.
Bye now.
Bye.